Hello, it's Phillip Taylor speaking from Richmond Green Chambers in London, and today I'm looking at a book which has come to us from the Child Poverty Action Group. This book is called Poverty, the Facts. It's the 6th edition and it's been written by a number of people. The main writer is Alan Marsh, and the contributions from Karen Barker, Carla, Aytton, Morag, Treanor and Moussa, Haddad, and there's a foreword by Gordon Brown which I'll refer to in a minute. I'm very pleased to review this book. I think it's an important book. We are all basically, as politicians and lawyers, we do have one aim in mind, and that is the eventual eradication of poverty. The problem we've got is the difficulties, the age-old difficulties, and at the moment there remain many issues that are unresolved. Now, I've given the title, Elizabeth and I talked about this book, and our title for the review is A Courageous Statement on Poverty at a Time of Much Needed Change. Now, it is a time of change because there are dramatic things happening within Britain itself at the moment, the United Kingdom, whatever you want to call the country, which are 4 distinct parts. We are going through the decision to leave the European Union, which is going to cause upheaval, the greatest upheaval certainly since the end of World War II. Let's look at the book first of all. It's only a little short paperback. I wanted to review it. There it is there. There's the spine, and then there's a little bit of information on the back. Now, the book runs to about 230 pages. There isn't actually an index at the back or anything like that, but there are some useful notes in each of the chapters, and if you go to the front of the book, you can see there's basically, that's the front page there. Then you've got some blurb about the book. Then there you've got the biographical information about the authors, which sets out who they are. They're people with a great deal of understanding. There are acknowledgements, and then there are a total of 13 chapters with conclusions at the end. The foreword, of course, written by Gordon, and there's a little dedication there which I'll just show you to start with, and then there's the foreword by Gordon, which is worth reading, whatever your particular views. It's a very important point that Gordon makes. Then we get into chapter 1, the introduction, and running it through what is poverty. There are quite a lot of charts actually, which is quite interesting. You can see bar charts and so forth all the way through. Now, let me talk about the book itself and what Gordon Brown has to say, bearing in mind that he was Chancellor for a very long time, of course then became Prime Minister, and then of course we had a general election and then a coalition government. Now, the former Prime Minister, Gordon Brown, has offered what is described here, what we call a pithy statement on poverty in what is his foreword to this CPAG new edition of Poverty, the Facts, the 6th edition. Both the book and the foreword, we say, are well worth reading, whether you like Brown or not, because it gives the reader some perspective on what we face today when child poverty is probably higher than in 1965 when CPAG was formed. And that's important to bear in mind. I know we've got a larger number of people in terms of the population, and we have a larger number of people coming to this country than we've had before, but the problem is that we do not seem to have eradicated poverty at all. It's got worse, and whether we can argue in terms of trends or anything else, the facts are there, and it's something that we need to know about and perhaps start looking at in a different way. I certainly think that will happen as we move towards the middle of this century, because Brown writes that poverty, the fact, should be a call to arms because there is so much we can do. I'm not going to make any comments about what he did and didn't do, but the fact is, this is what he's saying. The list he produces is important because it covers all the main contemporary issues that we currently face, and these are the political issues, bluntly. Protecting children's benefits, investment in housing and childcare to reduce costs and to help parents work, the tackling of low wages and insecure work, that includes of course 0 hours contracts, and to boost productivity. And he concludes, quote, "Above all, we need to treat child poverty as a national priority and produce a proper strategy to overcome it." And I would agree with that as a Conservative. I don't have a problem with that. I think it's a high priority as well once we get over the Brexit business after Brexit Day. The fact is it's got to be addressed and addressed now. And this book helps. These are, of course, aspirations, I must add, but ones which can be achieved, I suggest, because we need the right political and economic climates to be right, to be able to achieve it. And that will not be something that can be done overnight, but it's got to be something that we move towards. And I think even looking, if you do a comparative study with previous governments over the last 100 years, you will see how much change has taken place. There wasn't really any comment about the the government at the beginning of the 20th century, which was a Liberal government, which was one of the most radical because it introduced a whole range of things which we take for granted today in terms of welfare, which of course were built on at the end of World War II. But the point I'm making clearly is that we have to have the right economic climate, and we're going to have to move into that direction, I suggest, in 2019. Now, the book has a wide appeal, I think, to politicians, lawyers, historians and sociologists, and it's been very well researched by the authors. That's Alan Marsh and his colleagues. Now, we read this book and we were eagerly awaiting the new edition of the CPAG's flagship policy publication at this time of change which I've referred to, and the indecision that has been around the United Kingdom for some time. We're coming to the end of that. I wrote the review of this book earlier in 2018, and I'm recording it in the summer, but we are now moving much closer to Brexit Day itself, and I believe, though I'm not a Brexit supporter at all, but we are certainly, I believe, moving to a very new type of era, and I don't know what that will bring. We shall have to wait and see. What, of course, the Child Poverty Action Group have done here is they've given us the clearest and most comprehensive picture of poverty in the United Kingdom today, and I think it should be read by all members of Parliament, although sadly that won't happen. It's a shame because many of us feel we're not doing enough. We tend to ignore this issue and put it on the back burner, and it's something that we really could do some more about. The question really is how it's done. Obviously people have very different views about who should be in power and who should be doing what, but the very fact that we've got this book and we're talking about the issues is of itself, I suggest, a very important point forward. Now, with 4 million children now living in poverty in Britain, independent experts forecast that the figure is set to rise, and I have no reason to doubt that. So the significant progress made at the turn of the millennium, year 2000, to eliminate child poverty is being reversed. There are a lot of reasons for that, and I don't think you can start blaming lots of people, because quite often a lot of what happens is beyond the control, certainly, of local parliaments, because we are now moving very much to a global environment, both in terms of our financial institutions, the way we live, the damage, the pollution to the whole of the planet, and so forth. And we've got to start looking at it afresh. Now, as Gordon Brown says, it is time for a call to arms, as he puts it, which I always found rather interesting, bearing in mind what happened when he was Prime Minister. But that is his decision, and I respect the fact that he's taken the time to write the preface, or rather the foreword to this book. And I have no doubt whatsoever that what he says he absolutely means. And the point that I would make is that we are in a different era now, and we've got to assess, and I think reassess, where we go. Based on latest official figures then, Poverty the Facts looks at why UK child poverty rises and falls. That's a very interesting area in its own right. And the title gives some answers to the following questions which it poses. What do we mean by poverty? How do we measure poverty? Who is at the risk of poverty? Who is in poverty? How does the UK compare with other countries, and what can we do about it? Big questions, and some useful suggestions here, because we all have our own views. Clearly, the Tory view is very clear, and that is you can only deal with something like this if you have a very strong economy. and you have productivity at a very high level and so forth. Then there are other people who take a slightly different view of a socialist state or even a dependent state, and or communism or whatever it might be. So therefore you've got a very different series of political approaches. Let me conclude, because I'm not making any comments one way or the other on this, except to say, let me conclude by saying the book has been written by leading academics and policy analysts. I'm very grateful that they have, because they're setting a record of where we are at the moment in the year 2017-18, which is how the book was germinated during that time. And we feel it's essential for anyone wanting to understand the policy and political debates around poverty, and therefore it becomes essential reading for academics, students, social workers, welfare rights workers, financial inclusion teams, and the wider policy community. I wish bankers would read it, but I think that's a bit of a pipe dream myself. Thank you anyway, CPAG, for raising the profile and rising child poverty at a time when it should be falling and the excuses evaporating. We haven't got there yet, but we're going to get there. And it's the work of CPAG and others that will assist. The book was published on the 12th of October 2017. So I'm recording it some few months. I'm recording it in the middle of 2018. But you can see from the book itself, it's an important one. It's not a big book. It really runs, as I say, to 200 odd pages. There's the front, the spine, and then the back. Just opening it in the middle, you've got a lot of charts. There's quite a lot of justification for some of the submissions put forward. Poverty and costs, for instance, that title is. And then there are conclusions at the back of each chapter with notes, very useful notes. So it's what I would describe as the learned work. Who is at risk of poverty? And again, it says obviously got children, lone parents and so forth. The usual people are there. But of course, one thing that's worth bearing in mind is everybody can be in poverty if the whole of the country and its systems fail, and the way that we do our business and the way that we conduct society goes. So therefore don't think that there are people who will never suffer, because there are quite a lot of people who don't think they will, and they do. Anyway, a big thank you to all concerned. I'm very grateful to have this book and the opportunity to review it. And I'd like to thank CPAG very much indeed for the huge amount of work and effort they put in to help alleviate some of the really awful problems that we have in our society. Thank you. Bye-bye.